Okay, welcome to the New Jersey Paranormal Project, our fourth episode, where we're going to recap the Ringwood Manor. We're here with Marcy Keck and the ghost history medium herself, Kim. So thanks for joining us. And the Ringwood Manor was really intense. We got a lot of stuff, and you saw in the last three episodes, it was loaded with evidence, and it was an amazing time at the Ringwood Manor. So what this Zoom session's about is we're going to recap the episodes and also validate some of the points that you see in the video. So I like to start with our first episode, Ringwood Manor, episode 1, with Kim. We started the episode with a mediumship reading right out front the door of the Ringwood Manor. So Kim, take it away.
If I remember, I think I got the farmer first. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. So I went back and I was trying to look for some validating information of what the farmer was sharing about what I was seeing with the oxen and the cows and the fields and how they would sell stuff. And I think we also got through the Phasma box, also cotton. That was one of the ones that came through. So obviously there were farmers on the property, and there were farmers throughout the entire history from all the way back to when Ryerson was there and Havenskire was there, all the way up to the Coopers and Hewitts, so the Hewitt family. And there were multiple reports that I could find, especially in one really detailed book that was a memoir by Edward Hewitt, who is one of the sons who lived and grew up on that property in the manor. So he described that the area across the house, like where we were, we're standing out on the porch front deck area, looking out across the field, and that huge building on that hill over there, I think it's now the Abbott. So that actually ended up being the dairy barn, and they designed that building to look like a Swiss farm, a Swiss dairy barn, which it does kind of look like that from afar. It's beautiful. So that was the dairy farm, and all of those hills over there were actually cattle corrals and cow corrals, and they were dairy farmers. They this is with the Hewitts. They sold milk, they sold products in the local stores. They also even had a restaurant in New York City where they would sell and use their products they grew at Ringwood Manor in their restaurant in New York City. So they had a bunch of different products that they sold. They also had peach trees, fruit trees, and then they also had oxen. Edward did note that there were oxen on the property, and oxen were on the property even all the way back to Ogden, who was like one of the original iron masters in the area. They had oxen back then too, as they were really starting to develop the land. A lot of laborious knocking down of trees and stuff. So that was really cool to in the books could find out, okay, yeah, there definitely were meadows here, there definitely were cows around here. And as far as the cotton goes, I thought this was super interesting. So they grew flax, and I didn't know this, but apparently flax can be woven and it can be spun and woven. So that was another product that they made on the property, and the daughters and the sons, actually, even Edward mentioned that he was taught how to weave this flax. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know how much cotton looks like flax, probably similar if you can do kind of the same thing. I'm not quite sure.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So that was kind of history about that. We were able to find some pictures of some of the workmen in the area around that time, and they did kind of have that appearance of like the white shirt, the suspenders, the dark pants. But as far as names, I couldn't really correlate anybody or time frames. It's really hard. The workers on the properties were not really documented very well. So as far as who was next?
And then it became the woman that came through.
Okay,
we were thinking possibly Sarah, but in your research, kind of.
Yeah. So the woman who came through, it could possibly be two different individuals. So the time frame of when she was born and passed and her kind of physical appearance would match that of the mother. So would be the daughter of Peter Cooper, the wife of Abram Hewitt, and the mother of all of those children who grew up on that property. And her personality was kind of hard to find, but she loved aesthetics. She created this property. It was said that if she couldn't paint a picture or she couldn't have a picture, she was going to make the picture and live in that picture. She loved the property. She picked it out. She would prefer to stay there all the time, but her father liked her back in New York City more often, so they were really only in the property in the summer. But she really was the mastermind and kind of the lifeblood of this property. But I couldn't really find much about her personality or about other interests that she had. So it was more of, she was very invested in entertaining, very invested in the aesthetics of the property and getting it to her liking. But I couldn't really find out other interests. So that would be her. She died when she was 82 years old. So around that time frame that I said, but yeah, she did. Long, happy life. And she did pass away at Ringwood. So the other individual that I thought the description kind of matched was her daughter, which would be Sarah Cooper Hewitt, also known as Miss Sally. There were a lot of Sarahs in the family. Grandmother was named Sarah, daughter was named Sarah, and great-granddaughter. So her nickname was Miss Sally, and that was kind of how even her brothers referenced her, and a lot of the history books will reference her as Miss Sally. So she died when she was 71 years old. I couldn't find out where she had passed. So it was either at Ringwood or in New York City, but I couldn't find specifically where. And she died in 1930, so she was one of the last individuals to live in that house. And she took great pride in the house. She also was very aesthetic as far as like textiles. She's also described as being boisterous. She's described as being outgoing, unscrupulous, I think was another descriptive word, clever, tomboy. She was really into riding her horses. She had deep, deep, deep pride in her equestrian activities. And she also, poor thing, was not really described as being very beautiful, but she had tiny feet, and the tiny feet were considered elegant. So she took great pride in her tiny feet compared to the rest of her. She never married, and her sister lived in that house and pretty much were companions until they both passed. So the time, it's hard to say which one. You know, I did come up, oh, that's the other thing. I think I did say something about a horn. I think I did say something about a horn. That's right, it was a cornucopia. So Miss Sally, one of her like legends about her, like one of her like wild and crazy legends that she did was to get her maid's attention. She would actually open up the windows of her bedroom and blow her coach horn out the window to call her maids.
Okay.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, yeah.
So yeah, that was really specific. So with the horn and the horse, it most likely was her that I was picking up on. She definitely had a pretty big presence, but sometimes two individuals can come into a reading together as one. But with those personality descriptors, I probably would say I was more likely communicating with Miss Sally.
Yeah, and then just one thing about Sally, I posted also, I believe in episode 1, it's a photo that I took of Sally's pond back in 2007, and there's an apparition. You'll see like a head, arms with a blue hue around her, and she's floating right on like the pond, and that's known to be Sally's pond. I believe I think they built that pond for her.
They did, yeah.
So that was cool. Way back in 2007 when I went to the manor and I fell in love with the property. I've been going back ever since, and every time is filled with some kind of a paranormal incident. So, and now Peter Cooper.
Yeah, well, I'm going to finish off also by saying that you mentioned that by going back each time you are experiencing something on the property. You know, one of the things that Edward did write in his memoir was that it is very fitting that they will be the last family in this property, the last and actually only family that lived in that house. Like, that was how much life and love and laughter that they really did put into this house, that they felt it was only appropriate that they were the last ones to live there. So I'm not surprised individuals.
Yeah. Well, in his book, he mentioned, I remember reading about sledding there, and he was sneaking out with his, I believe, possible cousin or something, and they were sledding on the hills, and it just seemed like a picturesque kind of story, you know, of how they were living.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Really fully enjoying that industrial revolutionist.
Yeah, that early.
Well, yeah. Oh yeah. So lastly would be the male individual who I was speaking to. He was older, 80 to 90s, thin white hair, more quiet, reserved. So in the age range of when he was born, I think I said 1780s. So Cooper Hewitt was born in 1791 and passed in 1883. He was 92 years old. He was a figure of health up until he passed. He did pass away in New York City. I think there was a question I was wondering if he had passed there, but I eventually said he didn't, and he didn't. He passed away in New York City. He was a self-made man. He was not formally educated. He literally was brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. He was an inventor. He created all of these opportunities for himself, dealing, and he was beloved. He also was a mayor, and he, was he the mayor? Yeah. Oh no, congressman. I think he was the congressman. I think Abram was the mayor, but very active in politics in his later years in life. Loved his family, doted on his two children, and doted on the grandchildren, and would spend weeks at the Ringwood Manor home with them. He didn't live there as much as the rest of the family did, but he definitely spent a fair amount of time there. And he was fairly religious and fairly more reserved than the rest of the family, as being more eccentric.
Okay. And that's totally what you were picking up on. He was like, they were a little, little different, but
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah, so that's kind of some of the history that I found that was related to them. It's a fascinating family.
I think it validates all the points that you were picking up on and the people that were coming through. I mean, the horn, and I mean that at the time I'm like, a cornucopia. Like, do they like Thanksgiving? And now it makes sense,